It's that time again. The Doctor is back, and this time he has gone on some crazy adventures. The first one, he comes across Daleks. Yep, those nasty little pepper boxes are back, and they are ticked. You know, you have to admire Terry Nation. He came up with the perfect villain, with those wrong voices and their Nazi idealisms. The Daleks really are a perfect balance of comical and terrifying. Because when you break it down, they really are terrifying, even though later in the series they do get somewhat comical. This time, they've somehow managed to take over the world again, 200 years in the future, and they're trying to stop a bunch of rogue agents, guerrilla fighters, using, ironically, fighters who are more like guerrillas, called, well, actually, I don't know what they're called, because it's hard keeping these names straight. But anyway, the rogue agents are being pursued by agents of the Daleks, and the rogue's task is to stop a diplomatic official who's holding a peace summit at his house from killing everyone at the summit and starting a war from which the Daleks will pick up the pieces of what's left of Earth and use it as a base of operations. But, as it turns out, the stupid rogue agents actually caused the very thing they're trying to prevent. Turns out, the bomb that killed everybody, it was meant to be used against the government official. So, if the Daleks knew that, they probably wouldn't be there. But they do end up transporting back to the early 70s in order to stop the rogue agents, not realizing that they should really just let the rogue agents do their thing. Meanwhile, the Doctor and Jo are investigating strange occurrences of ghosts. They even meet up with themselves at one point, thanks to wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff. And for a while, Jo ends up in the future, and she's plied with fruits and veggies and all that good stuff by a human who's, for the most part, loyal to the Daleks. But he does do a quick heel turn when he finds out that the rogue agents could very well prevent this future Dalektopia. And while we don't see the ultimate outcome of successful destruction of the Daleks by the very bomb that led them to take over in the first place, because thankfully the Doctor managed to get everybody out of the house and change the future, as far as we know. Everything basically sorted itself out. The real highlight of the story were the gun battles, because there's Daleks, there's unit agents, there's rogue future agents, there are these mongoloid creatures, and did I mention the Daleks do make a personal appearance? In fact, entering the house in order to exterminate everybody, that is basically what sealed their fate. This is why you shouldn't try to change history. You end up causing the very thing you're trying to prevent. You gotta just let history happen. Otherwise, you'll be dumber than Daleks. In our next adventure, The Doctor and Joe end up on a planet called Peladon, where a young future king is torn between joining the Galactic Federation, which is a union of Earth, the Ice Warriors, who are considerably more peaceful now, genderless Cyclops creature called Centauri, I think her name is, and a root vegetable with a face inside a fishbowl. I kid you not. Anyway, he's torn between joining this federation. Did I mention Earth's part of it too? Seriously. And maintaining the superstition of his people. He's got one guy telling him he should join the Federation, and then he's got a priest guy telling him to cling to the past. And as a wild card, the Doctor pretends he's the delegate from Earth and tells everyone Joe's a princess. And over the course of the story, Joe and the future king end up kind of getting sweet on each other, but Joe's loyalty to the Doctor is strong at this point. So she turns him down. Meanwhile, the root vegetable dude wants to start a war between the Peladonians and another group. So he set up agents to capture one of the thought to be extinct wild boar-like beasts that they used to hunt, and train it to be sort of an omen character to play up the superstitions. And it very nearly works. Luckily, when the Doctor, who got roped into a gladiatorial match between a mute strongman and himself, and he refuses to kill the guy, the vegetable dude decides to tip his hand. Well, tip what passes for his hand in the form of a built-in death ray. Luckily, the Doctor and company are all saved by the Ice Warriors, who may be sort of peaceful, but not total hippie pacifists. They're still packing some heat. Meanwhile, the priest, who sort of was behind the whole thing, he did want his people to hold to the old ways, but not at the cost of a war. So he sort of repents at the end, and while he was misguided, he had everyone's best interest at heart. Unlike the vegetable dude, who just wanted a war so he could get at the minerals of either his planet or a neighboring planet. Either way, ultimately the Doctor and company save the day. Unfortunately, a monkey wrench is thrown in when the actual delegate from Earth shows up, and the Doctor and Joe have to get the Allons-y out of there. Even though Joe kind of spilled the beans to the now king, and he doesn't really care. He likes her just the same. And while it would have been nice to see them together, her adventures need to continue. Which brings us to a tussle with the Sea Devils, which are an offshoot of the Silurians. Now, funny thing is, that name is a misnomer. They should technically be called the Eocenes, as the Doctor puts it. And not only that, but somehow, someway, the Master, who has been in jail since the tussle with the Daemons, basically kept prisoner on an island castle that they've somehow converted into a prison. What is it with converting castles into prisons? Why don't they just build a new prison? Anyway, the Master not only has hoodwinked the warden of the prison into working with him, because he couldn't hypnotize anyone. The guards and everyone are immune to hypnosis for once. Thankfully, Unit is thinking. They thought of that. Just not the fact that the warden betrayed them. Not only that, but the Master managed to somehow make contact with the Sea Devils, who've been sort of waking up, but can't fully wake up because their equipment is faulty. And the Master promises that he can wake them all up. So, once again, they can rule the world, of course. Luckily, the Doctor and Jo managed to outwit the Master and nearly make peace with the Sea Devils. Unfortunately, some idiot bureaucrat who thinks he's John Flippin' Wayne decides to declare war just when peace was nearly achieved. Thanks a lot, dingus. I really hope he got a janitorial job after that. Anyway, with any hope of peace shattered, the Doctor is forced to rig up their revivification machine to blow up, and so he has to destroy the Sea Devils, sadly. And because the Master was betrayed by the Sea Devils at some point, he uses that opportunity of working with the Doctor to thwart the Devils to escape. So yeah, once again, the Master is on the loose. And he gives a cheery little wave to the Doctor as he escapes. Cheeky sod. Next, we come to the Mutants. On the planet Solos. One moment. Minor technical difficulties. Anyway, on the planet Solos, in the distant future, there exist two peoples. The native inhabitants, and which are kind of Native American-like, sort of mixed with ancient Rome to a degree. And also these humanoid bug creatures that are mutants, basically mutated native inhabitants. And they're considered diseased and killed on sight. But not by the natives, by the imperial Earthlings who wish to annex the planet. Unfortunately, things haven't gone quite as planned. Earth is running out of money and resources, and they decided to just give the planet back to its inhabitants after it was thoroughly wrecked. Meanwhile, the Marshall, basically the head cop of the space station that's orbiting the planet, he's been secretly working with a crooked doctor, or crooked scientist, in order to convert the atmosphere of the planet, which is toxic to humans, so that it then would be toxic to the inhabitants. And he doesn't care who gets in his way. He even takes out the government official who says that because the government is pulling out, dude's going to get a desk job. And he would rather be Emperor of Solos. Basically, guy's gone drunk with power. Meanwhile, the Doctor and Joe are delivering a message encased inside what looks like a small boulder to someone whose touch will open the device, and no one else. Eventually, they find out who is worthy to open the device. A young native inhabitant of the planet who is vying for freedom, while one of his leaders from, I guess, a rival tribe wanted to be part of the Earth Empire, but eventually was betrayed and blasted out an airlock. Well, actually, no. He wasn't blasted out an airlock. The station was compromised and he got pulled out a hole. Meanwhile, the Doctor and a scientist thought long dead on the planet, after getting open the message boulder, find tablets which explain the history of the people, because they've lost a lot of their history. Turns out the mutations, they're not a bad thing. They're a good thing. The people are supposed to be changing with the seasons, which each one lasts 500 years. Turns out the natives are supposed to go from sort of Native American centurions to humanoid bugs to characters that look like grand marshals of a pride parade. I'm sorry, but that's what they look like. You gotta see it to believe it. Not only that, they become sort of deity-like, with flight, teleportation, energy blasts, telepathy. And eventually, the Doctor and the scientists figure out how to trigger this en masse. And in so doing, save the dwindling population of Solos. Meanwhile, two guards who don't see eye to eye with the Marshal and work to help the Doctor and company, they are noteworthy because there's two of them. A black guy named Cotton and a white guy named Bugsy. Well, anyway, what's notable is not only does the white guy die instead of the black guy, but the black guy ends up being promoted to acting marshal of the station to facilitate the retreat from Solos. So that's kind of a win for black characters at the time. People need to talk more about him, because he is pretty cool. Although he weirdly sounded Indian to me. For some reason they gave him an Indian accent. It's weird. Anyway, on to the next adventure. The Time Monster. Once again, the Master is working a scheme, and this time it involves an Atlantean crystal and apparently the Titan Kronos. Turns out Kronos wasn't a Titan or a deity of any kind. It was a creature that eats time and takes the form of an albino birdman. Yeah, because Doctor Who. Anyway, the Master basically dupes some scientists with promises of matter transport tech, when in reality he ends up connecting to another piece of the crystal in the distant past, and he brings an Atlantean priest to his time, the Master's time, that is, and ends up convincing him to help him, even without hypnosis, because apparently Atlanteans are pretty resistant to hypnosis for some reason. Anyway, the plan is to bend Kronos to his will, and in so doing, take over the world. Of course. Luckily, the Doctor and Joe and Unit are on hand to help stop him. Unfortunately, when the time crystal goes wonky, everyone outside of its immediate vicinity starts to slow down because of time dilation and time manipulation. One poor guy, one of the scientists, ends up aging to age 80 from age 25. Luckily, it's only temporary. But he got a big scare. He admits he's a coward. And honestly, you can't fault the guy for being afraid. I mean, he could have died of old age, like that. Also, there's a lot of gender role banter between him and his fellow scientists, who's a woman, which kind of got old fast. But I didn't hate the guy because, after all, I feel older than I am. And that tends to make one sympathize with him. Anyway, turns out the albino birdman isn't the true form of Kronos. For that, the Master has to use his TARDIS, which has been made up to look like a piece of lab equipment, to go back to Atlantis before they were worshipping Amdo and were still worshipping Poseidon. So this is way back into Who history. Also, briefly, the Doctor ends up getting consumed by Kronos and pulled out of time itself. Luckily, he's on hand to guide Joe to bring him back. But that was a narrow escape. Eventually, the fight is taken to Atlantis itself, where the Master charms the Queen of Atlantis, who's young, hot, and a right temptress. Meanwhile, the old King of Atlantis, who knows how dangerous Kronos really is, because he's a lot older than he looks. He's human, but he's also somehow able to stave off death by old age. He knows how dangerous Kronos really is, and he foresees the destruction of Atlantis. So he sides with the Doctor. And unfortunately, the Master is too potent temptation for the Queen, so she turns on her husband with the understanding that he'll be kept as a figurehead until he finally passes away naturally, and then the Master will take over and get access to the crystal and Kronos' true form. Of course, he betrays her and whops the king on the face. Well, has someone else whop the king on the face, which causes him to stress out so bad that he dies. And ultimately, he and his lackeys, after a little hissy fit by the Queen, because she didn't actually hate the old king. She wanted him left alone. That was a surprise, considering how quickly she betrayed him. Anyway, with the Master's lackeys, he unleashes Kronos' apparent true form, even sending him some poor sod to get the crystal, and confronting a flippin' Minotaur that the Doctor quickly subdues with some Venusian Aikido. Unfortunately, the old king's predictions came true, and Atlantis gets destroyed, but not everyone gets killed. Enough people live on to found the partial colony that the second Doctor meets. So there's that bit of Who history for you. Meanwhile, escaping what's left of Atlantis, the Doctor has to follow the Master into the time vortex because Joe tried to make a citizen's arrest and ended up becoming a hostage. So the Doctor has to sort of pull out a trump card. He's going to time ram the Master's TARDIS, which would put them in the exact time and space as each other, which would blow them up. Now, he comes close, but he hesitates at the end because he's reluctant to kill Joe, because it will kill all three of them. But the thing is, Joe has got some big brass, because she flips the dial all the way over, causing the time ram, and hopefully saving everybody. But they don't end up dead. Somehow, someway, they get pulled out of space-time and end up meeting Kronos, whose true form is irrelevant. So this time, it took the form of a dolled-up woman. Apparently, she can be merciful if she chooses. I mean, she could have spared Atlantis, but that's neither here nor there. She is grateful for the Doctor freeing her, because she was stuck in a prison, partially thanks to the Master. And so she grants the Doctor and Joe a boon. She lets them go home because they asked. And while she does plan to torment the Master for eternity, the Doctor couldn't bring himself to let that happen, so he asks her to spare him and let him go too. Because the plan is to have him be rearrested by UNIT. But unfortunately, he manages to give our heroes the slip and get into his TARDIS and go flying off to who knows where. But basically the day is saved, although Atlantis is destroyed and the Master has escaped. Overall, the time stream has been preserved. And Kronos will go off and do her thing, hopefully not destroying everyone and everything. Meanwhile, back at the time present, when UNIT went to arrest the Master, he used the Atlantean crystal to jumpstart the machine that they were using and temporarily freeze the Brigadier and his men. And unfortunately, when the two scientists tried to fix it, they turned Benton into a baby. Oh, don't worry, he got better. And everybody had a big laugh at his expense right at the end. So there you have it. That was the next season the current season of Doctor Who, the Pertwee era. When next we meet, we celebrate the 10th anniversary of Doctor Who. We fight the Master a few more times. We meet some aliens. And we say goodbye to Joe Grant. Until then, this is Mr. J signing out and reminding you, Venusian Aikido is cool, and not all ice warriors are bloodthirsty monsters.